everybody, I'm Jonathan Randall, and welcome to another episode of American Jew, The Interview. I'm very happy to have in studio with me, Sami Manause. Am I saying it right?
Almost. Manausa.
Manausa, okay. I'm so horrible with names. I emailed Sami, I was like, send me the phonetic spelling of your name. Like, I'm definitely gonna mess it up. It's funny because growing up, like, my dad was so horrible with names, and we used to, like, always be mortified and like make fun of him. And now the older I get, I'm like I suck at names. I can't get it right. And like people tell me their names 20 times. But anyways, thank you for coming, Sami. How are you doing today?
I'm great. First of all, a word in your defense. I did forget to send you the phonetic spelling of my name.
Okay, thank you.
So I didn't really give you the tools to work with.
I appreciate that. I love a woman that's defending me right from the start.
Great.
This is perfect. So Sami is, do you work for, or is it more like a volunteer basis with the If Not Now movement?
There's multiple answers to that. So
okay.
I work for the If Not Now national staff doing social media, but then I also volunteer as an organizer with the Chicago chapter. So both.
Okay. So for those that don't know, will you just give a brief little description of what If Not Now is?
Yeah. So If Not Now is a movement of American Jews organizing our community to end U.S. support for Israeli apartheid. And it started way back in 2014 with Operation Cast Lead. I don't remember which one. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Hopefully your boss isn't listening.
Yeah, seriously. Or maybe it was Protect
Was it Operation Eagle?
It was whatever the operation in Gaza was in 2014.
Okay. That's when If Not Now started.
Yeah, that is. I was not one of those people. I'm very new to the movement. I'm very new to organizing. But there were American Jews that just basically got frustrated that our community wasn't speaking out about these war crimes that we were witnessing happening in Gaza, and they decided to start organizing us. And I feel like the courage of those people in those years, I'm able to do what I can do right now because of the immense courage that those people had in speaking out. They paved the way for me to be able to get on the internet and talk about this stuff. Because I don't know if they hadn't had that courage around 2014, I don't know if it would have been the same landscape a couple years ago when I started kind of asking questions about Israel-Palestine.
So how did you get involved with If Not Now?
So I got hired in March. They were looking for someone to take over social media, and I had a little bit of what I would call informal social media experience with Israel-Palestine stuff. Last September, I started a TikTok account with my friend and Harvard classmate, whose name is Ciara. She's amazing. Shout out Ciara. We had spent the summer in Israel-Palestine, and the kind of resounding ask of all the activists and friends that we were able to make along the way, they were like, you need to go back to the U.S. and tell people what you saw. Because we were going into the West Bank, we were in Israel proper. You see the stark contrast between, you see the apartheid.
Right. So was that your first time in Israel?
So last summer was my second time. My first time was last March. I never went on birthright or anything. It was always, I like to say I grew up passive Zionist.
So what does that mean, passive Zionist?
So I grew up in a Reform synagogue, and the Israel programming was there. I just don't know if it went in one ear and out the other. It just wasn't, like many American Jews, I was trying to figure out how much Jewish practice was going to figure into my life. I also grew up in a predominantly Christian environment, so that always impacted the way that I thought about it. And I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
I'm the worst.
But you are Jewish.
Yes.
But you were more in a Christian environment, so
yeah.
Judaism wasn't a big part of your upbringing? Or?
It was. It was, but it wasn't at the same time. I come from an interfaith family, so my dad is Catholic, and there wasn't a private Jewish school where I grew up, and so my parents wanted us to have a private education, so they sent us to private Catholic school. And so I was still very unambiguously Jewish. I still became a bat mitzvah. It was just that most of the people in attendance at my bat mitzvah were Christian. And after that, I think because of that, I always felt to a certain extent like I had a foot out the door, if that makes sense.
Because of, like, you had a Christian dad?
Yeah, I never felt like anyone was actively making me less welcome in the community, but...
In the Jewish community?
In the Jewish community.
Okay. Not at your bat mitzvah, where they're like, we want to celebrate her becoming a woman, but we're still mad at her for killing Jesus.
I went to a progressive Catholic school. I will say they were good about that. They actually really made me feel welcome. So I had kind of a rosy colored glasses with it, you know?
So it doesn't seem like growing up you had much of a connection with Judaism. Seems almost superficial. What's your connection now?
So let's go back to 2020. I had just graduated from undergrad and moved back in with my parents while I was applying to graduate programs. And I also was realizing that I had just graduated from the University of Florida, which has like the biggest number of Jewish students in the undergraduate population of any public school, and I did not participate in it for a second. Because I just wasn't interested. That wasn't my priority. I kind of was thinking about like partying and also doing well in school because I love school. But I just wasn't trying to be more Jewish. And then I came home to my hometown and was like, you know what? I should start cultivating this part of my identity because it is something that I care about even though I haven't been active about it. And so as that's happening, there was a really nice congregant in my hometown synagogue who was like, hey, why don't we like get together and do like a havruta thing and chit chat, and I can give you books from my library and we can talk Jewish stuff. I think that was maybe when I started realizing that the Israel programming was always there. I just had not consumed it really because I just wasn't, for all the reasons I just described, I just like felt like I wasn't totally a part of the community. Definitely want to make clear, I never felt ostracized. It was just like very circumstantial with how I was raised in an interfaith family where I was just really questioning how I wanted Jewishness to be in my life. It was always going to be there, but a long journey of kind of how and how much.
So when you were starting to, learn with this individual and talk about Jewish stuff, and you said that's when, kind of the Israel programming, some people call it Zionist propaganda or whatever. What were your feelings and thoughts before that when it came to Israel and Palestine?
Literally totally uncritical. That's where I mean passive Zionism, where I think if you had asked me prior to 2020, like, are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? I would be like, what do you mean? I'm Jewish and pro-Israel. And I just literally had never given it a critical thought, which is embarrassing. But then I'm having these conversations with this fellow congregant. It's also 2020. So George Floyd has been murdered, and like many other like white so-called progressives in the US, I'm thinking a lot about me as a white person, whiteness in relation to power and state violence. And I'm realizing that my idea of Jewishness is very white and Ashkenazi centric. So while I'm trying to be back in my hometown Jewish community, I'm also really working hard to seek out, especially like on the internet, seek out Jews of color, their voices, and just start thinking about, again, the role that like whiteness has played in my Jewish identity. And I think I came across like Rebecca Pierce, who's a really incredible like Black Jewish thought leader, and she also happens to be very outspoken in favor of Palestinians. And I think that was maybe the first time I really encountered progressive accept Palestine. And I was very challenged by it because I was like, on the one hand, there are certain Jewish voices and Jewish institutional voices telling me that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic, but I'm hearing that there are war crimes happening. And so I went to that.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
and
you're
that
fine.
was the first time that you were like, brought to the knowledge that there were war crimes about these
Yeah.
events. So you basically lived your whole life. You don't have that strong of a connection with Judaism, but you have heard things. You have a Jewish mother. You had a bat mitzvah, and nowhere during this period of time have you ever considered that it was apartheid, that people are getting oppressed, and it wasn't until, I guess, social media that you started to awaken, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's crazy looking back how uncritical it was, but it comes from just having literally never encountered a Palestinian narrative. It's not even that I knew that there is some sort of conflict, and that if someone asked me, I was probably on the side of the Jewish people because I'm a Jewish person. But like even feeling a little disconnected from the Jewish community, I still did consume so much of that indoctrination.
Why do you think that, when you started seeing these videos, when you started like hearing more about what's happening there, when you started learning about the war crimes, that you were able to accept it and investigate further, where so many Jewish people, especially Jewish Americans, like you said, immediately say it's anti-Semitic, are immediately turned off, and can't even open their minds and their hearts to the possibility of that being the truth?
Well, I think initially I would love to say like my internal arc is always toward progress, but I think I started out trying to understand more because I wanted to be able to defend what I thought at the time was the right position, which was pro-Israel. Again, it was totally uncritical. I knew nothing, but I started seeking out other perspectives because I was like, surely there has to be something wrong here. There's again that like quandary of progressive except Palestine. There are these people who I agree with across the board, except for on this thing about the Jewish state. And for me, it was just like once you learn, you can't unlearn like the truth of what's going on. But it's also I recognize how much it is linked to the traumatic memory of the Holocaust. I think that probably has a lot to do with it, but ultimately I can never speak for anyone else.
So, you mentioned earlier about like being Ashkenazi, and I noticed that that's something that's on the If Not Now website a lot, where it's talking about Ashkenazi dominance. Could you like explain a little bit to people like what that is and why If Not Now makes such a point of mentioning it, and why it's an issue, you think, in the Jewish community?
Yeah, I'm not a historian, but conventionally in the US, Jews not of an Ashkenazi background, Sephardi, Mizrahi Jews, have been Jews everywhere. Their experiences have kind of been, and their traditions have kind of been marginalized. And I think what motivated me in wanting to kind of break out of that Ashkenazi centrism was there have been so many Jews everywhere. There have been such rich diasporic histories and traditions from everywhere in the world, and I felt like limiting it to just Ashkenazi traditions was, well, first of all, just like ahistorical, because there has been such a rich breadth of traditions across the world. Like there's so many cool like Judeo-X languages out there, and I feel like in the US especially, they have often gotten marginalized. At least speaking from my own experience, I grew up having a very specific idea of what an American Jew looked like, and it was like you or I.
Right. Okay. So like white Jews.
Yeah, and I realized that's, at the very least, it's limiting my ability to show up for other Jews, like Jews of color, to pretend like their Jewish experience is not the norm. Like there ultimately just isn't a norm you know,
when it comes to Judaism.
yeah, every Jewishness is going to
Well,
look a little different.
do you think that like Ashkenazi, particularly white Jews, Eastern European Jews, that is such a huge problem when it comes to what's happening in Palestine and Israel? Because these aren't more Semitic Jews. These are white Jews like us, Ashkenazi, who are coming there instead of ones that have, lived there, his families have lived there for generations, and of course they want to go back to history and say, well, 2,000 years ago our people were here. But do you think that the whiteness is an issue, not only with the own Jewish community, but like in Israel, Palestine, of why there's such animosity, hurt, hatred from the Palestinian people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that they're, again, not a historian, not an expert, but I think if you look at activists that are Mizrahi and they don't speak for their whole communities, I'm not trying to make a generalization about Mizrahi Jews in Israel or Sephardi Jews in Israel either, but there are, okay, one great example, Ella Shohat, Zionism from the perspective of its Mizrahi victims. And it talks about how Jews of color have historically been marginalized in Israel. And
Right, like the Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews there, that they've come there, they faced a lot of discrimination
yeah.
and hatred just for having, different shade of skin.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, if we're talking about the establishment of Israel, we're talking about a process of settler colonialism, and that was influenced by the same rubric of white European racism that European anti-Semitism.
Right, so when, they are saying that, what's happening in Israel right now is like cases of Jewish supremacy, do you almost believe that there is a part of that's like Ashkenazi supremacy, that is the white Jewish supremacy?
I definitely think there's an asterisk after Jewish where it's like, and also this Jewish has to look a certain way.
Do you consider yourself a Zionist?
I do not, personally.
So, what does a Zionist mean to you? Because I guess a lot of people take it in different definitions. So when you say no, you don't consider yourself a Zionist, are you saying that you don't think Israel should be there? You want Israel, for lack of a better word, to be destroyed?
Yeah, the people in the comments across social media love to ask me that too. Great question.
I feel like this is a thing of part of Zionist propaganda where they want to be like, are you Zionist? And then you say, no, you're not Zionist. And then they want to be like, oh, you don't believe Israel has a right to exist? You're an anti-Semite. It's kind of easy to say that. I mean, I don't know any other nations where people are constantly asking, does it have a right to exist? Does it have a right to exist? But Israel, for some reason, people are obsessed with that because I believe it's a way to dismiss people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I say I'm not a Zionist, I say that recognizing that Zionism means different things to different people. It's Zionisms. To try to claim that Zionism is or has ever been one thing at one time would be ahistorical. But if we're talking about the most abstract version of Jews deserve to live safely somewhere, then I can subscribe to that, obviously. But if Zionism is what it does and has done is apartheid, and I can't subscribe to that.
I hear what you're saying. I think, that's the problem, that there's not there are clear definitions of Zionism, but I feel like everybody interprets it in a different way. And just to be like, does Israel have the right to exist? I mean, Jewish people have the right to have a nation, I think, but I don't think that Israel has the right to exist the way it is, the way it has been existing. And, it doesn't have the right to exist through the, dehumanization and the oppression of the Palestinian people. But that's there's not that clear cut kind of thing when it comes to Zionism.
Um, yeah, I mean, I, I think first of all, I'll say I'm not a policy expert, and history and the world need a lot less of like random white Americans being like, this is how we should carve up another part of the world. But
It seems like a lot of your stuff. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it involves a little bit of white guilt.
You think so?
Yeah, it seems like that's what kind of turned you on a little bit when it started with George Floyd, and then like with the Ashkenazi dominance and with colonialism and like all these things happening that like are like, do you feel bad about like that it's more white or about the Jewish oppression?
I've never really thought to rank them. I don't know. To me, I've thought of it as a process of like learning how to have my ethics and my activism driven by perspectives from the margins, and recognizing that my positionality has put me in the margins in some ways, but not in others, if that makes sense. Like, I'm Jewish, but I'm also white. I'm still American. Does that make
Right.
sense?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, sure. I mean, but there were plenty of white Jews in the Holocaust, and they still all got killed. So, like, I don't think that anything like that could happen again. But if it did happen again, or being white doesn't protect you from anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I don't know if I think about it the same way where explain what you mean by white guilt. I guess that's what.
Like, feeling bad for being white because of the oppression that white people have historically had marginalized communities throughout history.
I mean, do you not feel that?
No, I don't. I mean, I think it sucks that what white people have done, but I don't feel guilty personally
Okay, then
because of the actions of others or people before me. I mean, there are plenty of shitty people that aren't white. Like being white isn't a prerequisite to being a shitty person. I mean, it seems like it does help a lot, but
I agree with you then that it's not guilt like I'm sitting around mulling about how upset I am that I'm white and my ancestors have done shitty things. It's more like recognizing implication. And especially in the case of Israel Palestine, recognizing that I don't have any Israeli family. I don't have people over there that have been have served or anything in the IDF, but recognizing that I am implicated as a Jewish person when Israel is, enacting a Jewish supremacist apartheid state in my name.
absolutely, I hear what you're saying, and that's a major issue that I have with what's happening too. Is that it's being done like in the name of Judaism and Jews everywhere, which isn't necessarily true and is a bad look, I think, for the Jewish people as a whole. Now, I know you just mentioned how you don't have a lot of family in Israel. You don't particularly know people that served in the military there. Did you have like a Jewish support group, a lot of Jewish friends? Like, I guess what I'm trying to get to is how did your involvement with If Not Now, your views on Israel and Palestine affect maybe other people that you were close with?
So I think that in a weird way, kind of starting to solidify my opinions on Israel Palestine was a catalyst for finding Jewish community and Jewish belonging like I've never had it before. I sorry.
It's okay. I think that's very interesting, actually, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit more because I think a lot of Jewish people come together with other Jews for their love and commitment to Israel. I feel like that's something that brings Jews together, whether it's going on a birthright trip, or just being part of the synagogue, talking about Israel, celebrating Jewish holidays. But you seem to have found a greater sense of Jewish community from opposing Israel.
Yeah, you could say that. I wouldn't say that it's totally based in opposition. It's also about envisioning a version of Jewish life that isn't so closely linked to nationalism and like having to oppress another group of people.
So you don't think there should be an Israel?
This is where again I'm like the world needs less of like random white folks saying how the
But
world
you're
should
not
be
a random
colored.
white folk because you work for this organization. You have a strong opinion. You make a lot of, content about it. So, of course, these are just, ideas and opinions and thoughts. And I'm just curious, like, I don't know if your views exactly line up with If Not Now, but I'm just curious, like, what do you envision? What do you hope for? Like, are you a fan of the two-state solution? Are you a fan of just one state? What it's okay to talk and spread awareness and call out Israel for its war crimes, but like, where do you think this is going? Because I hope that it could end in a more positive way. I know there's a lot of people that just want there to be total destruction of Israel, and of course, there are people that don't want there to be a Palestine, that don't believe there's a Palestine. I, maybe I should pick more of a side, but I am something more in the middle. I think, Israel does exist. I think it's unrealistic to think that everyone's just going to pack up their bags and move away and give everything. And I try to bring a little, realistic attitude to the situation. But I guess when I ask you that, it's not like I want to corner you into saying something. I'm more curious of like, what is your vision, whether it aligns with If Not Now's. I'm not sure exactly what theirs is. And like, what do you think are like good solutions?
So If Not Now, first of all, doesn't have an official position on like one state or two state. And I do kind of share that, where ultimately, whatever configuration of states can lead to full equality and democracy for all people living there, that is what needs to be the solution.
I love that. And that sounds awesome. But is that realistic at all? Like when it's like who's going to take control? If it's not going to be, not that the Israeli government obviously are doing a horrible job right now, and they have, thousands of people who have been protesting the street for months. Netanyahu's coming to America next week, and, a bunch of 3,500 artists and academics in Israel just signed letters. They don't want Biden to meet with him. They don't want him to speak with the UN. But, like, who is going to usher in this age where everyone is going to be treated equally? Because it doesn't seem to me that like even Palestinians are treated equally amongst themselves. Israelis aren't treated equally amongst themselves either. So how are we going to achieve this, do you think?
I, I, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be over there talking to Bibi.
Talking to Bibi.
Be like, dude, you gotta go.
Maybe if you picked him a little cash.
Hey man, get out of here. I guess let's say that
This is just like, I'm not trying to hold you to anything. We are,
part of
there's
it
a
is
little bit about brainstorming.
I don't have, this is an ongoing question that I ask myself. I don't know what the right solution is.
Do you think it hurts If Not Now as a movement for not having a more concrete position?
I think a lot of, well, first of all, our goal is to end U.S. support for Israeli apartheid, and part of that is going after AIPAC, and part of that is also ending unconditional U.S. support for Israel, and I think we recognize that. I know I don't know if this feels like I'm copping out, but like some of us, not all of us, a lot of people in If Not Now are also Israeli citizens, but a lot of us aren't and will never be, and it doesn't feel like me, for example, like I'm not going to make Aliyah at any point. I'm never going to be a citizen there. It doesn't feel like my opinion really matters about what like the specific configuration will look like. But if it has to be a question, if the choice is between a Jewish state and a democratic state, I'm gonna go with the democratic state. Because also part of why I'm so passionate about this is that I don't believe that oppression of another group of people is a long-term solution for Jewish safety.
100%. It's definitely not. If anything, I've mentioned this lots of times. I think Israel is probably the most dangerous place for Jews, and what happens there reflects poorly on Jews in the diaspora and makes their lives even more dangerous as well.
Yeah.
So, when you say that, I hear you. I could relate to you because, a lot of times people ask me, what do you want? You want a one state? You want this? I'm like, it's not my place to say what I want being a white American. I feel the same way. But whose place is it? Because if we want to say it's just for the Palestinians, it seems that the majority of Palestinians want Israel gone.
I mean, I don't know if I would. Well, I guess that comes down to like, in this hypothetical, that future.
But it's more than a hypothetical future. It's a future that people are fighting for. People are speaking out about. People are trying to make change. But it seems like I struggle with this myself. Where it's like, am I just making noise and am I just shitting on Israel? Or am I being an agent of change and progress? And is that even possible?
I mean, maybe a little devil's advocate here, but I think requiring everyone who speaks out about Israeli apartheid to have an answer to what do you think should be the configuration of states, that's kind of playing into Zionist methods of shutting down conversation about Israel.
I mean, I guess it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because it can be seen as shutting down, but if we're not discussing these matters, if we're not talking about them, then how are we ever gonna make change? How are we ever gonna do anything different if everyone's like, I'm afraid to say it? And I guess when I ask you, I'm not asking in a way that's like trying to demonize you or shut you up. I'm trying to figure out, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna, free Palestine? Which I actually want to ask you about, because I noticed that on the If Not Now website, that phrase is nowhere to be seen. What's up with that?
I think part of it is that because our official position is, our goal right now is to end U.S. support for Israeli apartheid, we recognize that the people that we're trying to reach are people that are at various phases of their unlearning journey. And we try to really meet them with empathy, because we know, many of us from personal experience, that grappling with, am I a Zionist or not, is really hard. It's really difficult, and it can feel really isolating. And we're trying to create a community, we are creating communities where those types of questions can be asked and not immediately shut down. And this isn't my personal stance necessarily, but I think, as you pointed out, Free Palestine, just like Zionism, can mean different things to different people, and not putting that prominently on the website is a way to let people know that if you still consider yourself a Zionist but you're anti-occupation, we still want you to come in and have these conversations with us. Does that make sense?
I mean, I guess. I think saying Free Palestine is about ending the occupation. It is about ending the apartheid, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean, the utter destruction of Israel. And I think, again, these are the terms and the phrases that are problematic because people want to put them in black and white, and instead of really understanding the nuance and just what the phrase means, Free Palestine, it means free Palestinians and Palestine from the oppression that they've been facing now for 75 years. And it's not have to be such a political thing, but it has to be more of like a rally cry and something that people could join together and say, yes, we are sick of what is happening, whether those people are Palestinians, whether they're Jewish people, whether they're Arabs from other places, or whether they're just, other religions, ethnicities, or whatever that want to stop, the oppression and the human rights violations that have been taking place.
Yeah, I mean that's personally how I use the phrase "Free Palestine," but again, like I think back to 2020 and I think there was a period of time in my like unlearning journey where I was like, well, maybe I'm still a Zionist, but I'm anti-occupation. And then at some point I felt like that just wasn't, honestly, at some point I felt like the specific label was a lot less important than like calling out war crimes as they're happening.
Definitely, I think calling out the crimes is what's, I think, most important.
Like, let's talk about what's going on. Let's not get too bogged down with labels.
Well, there's a lot going on. You mentioned speaking with, other Jewish people, people that are Zionists. What do you think the biggest misconception Jews, Zionists, whatever you want to call them, have when it comes to Israel and Palestine?
The biggest misconception?
Yeah, I know, like, people grew up with, like,
I know the answer. It's a land without a people for a people without a land. That was the first big moment of my unlearning journey when I realized that like, oh shit, this might not be just like anti-Semitism. People might actually be talking about apartheid. It's when I learned that like there were people there. There were almost 1 million people got ethnically cleansed. And I think that even that is hard to convey to people out there, to pro-Israel American Jews.
So, of course, I think it's great to stop American support of Israel, especially financial support. Shutting down AIPAC sounds great. What do you think, regular people could do who, want to have an impact on this, who want to help, stop Israel, U.S. aid to Israel? Like, what could they do?
I mean, depending on your theory of change, there's a lot of different answers to that. One way is annoying the shit out of your elected officials to not take money from AIPAC, to make more noise about conditioning aid at the very least. There's also just showing up and being in the streets. I think there's a lot to say about just showing, especially people that aren't necessarily directly impacted, but go show up in the streets, go see what your local Palestine Solidarity Committee or Students for Justice in Palestine, what they're organizing soon. The USCPR has a great resource for finding actions. I think our government has not caught up with public opinion, which tends to be critical of Israel. Maybe not like full-blown free Palestine, but at least the most recent number that I've seen in a survey said that 40% of young Jewish people, not young people in general, young Jewish people thought that what Israel is doing is apartheid. And I think making as much noise as possible, whether that's retweeting stuff, whether that's writing to your elected official, whether that's showing up in the street, make noise.
What do you have to say to people who think, if not now, what you're doing, it makes you a self-hating Jew, and that this kind of feelings, thoughts about Israel are anti-Semitic?
I mean, I've heard it many a time. I know that I'm not a self-hating Jew, first of all. And I think a lot of why I feel the need to be so vocal about this, like to be making so much noise, is like we talked about, I don't see an apartheid system as a sustainable avenue for Jewish safety and Jewish flourishing. I think that Jews will never be safe unless we are in solidarity with other marginalized people. Like, liberation is a group project. And
I'm sorry, but this is like, you've mentioned this already before, and I think that this is part of, like, if not now, also like what they believe about the safety for Israel. But how about just like the treatment of the Palestinian people? Like, can we take Israel safety out of the equation? I mean, you also said that you're not a Zionist, so it's like you don't really even, it seems like, care that much for Israel. To like, why is there this like importance put on Israel's safety, which I totally agree with, but I feel like, why isn't more attention put on just like the constant human rights violations, the constant oppression and abuses that the Palestinian people face, and why isn't that more of the focal point, instead of being like, well, if we stop oppressing them, then we'll be better off.
I mean, maybe I haven't done the best job conveying it, but I would say that also is a fundamental part of why I do what I do, is because and why If Not Now exists, is because the treatment, historical and present, of Palestinians in the name of Jewish safety, or even for any other reason, that treatment is unacceptable and should be protested. So I appreciate you pointing that out, because that is an anchor of like my personal activism, and I have felt like If Not Now is also kind of motivated by that ethos. But I think part of it is bringing up Jewish safety is also because that whole line of argumentation has been taken over by the pro-Israel side. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's always the big counter argument to when someone says free Palestine. It's like, but how will Jews ever be safe? And it's like, well, they're not if their safety relies on the oppression
Right, that's
of
an
others.
empty argument to be like, we need Israel to be safe. Like, it's not really that safe. And I mean, we've come a long way since, the Holocaust. Of course, anti-Semitism is rising. It's probably, at an all-time high probably since World War II. But I think a large part of that anti-Semitism is because of Israel and what's happening. There's the new style of anti-Semitism, opposed to like the Jews, controlled the banks, they killed Jesus, all that kind of stuff. And now there's the Jews are oppressors of the Palestinian people.
I guess. I mean, I also feel like that old classic style of anti-Semitism is still very much there. It
is, but I feel like it's a little different. You have like people in kind of like the South, like that's like a more of an ignorant anti-Semitism, I think, opposed to people who are like, my cousin was killed by an Israeli soldier just for like trying to go to school or something like that, and that's where their hatred comes from.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're looking at anti-Semitism, you can't do that without also looking at the power imbalances that created whatever particular instance of anti-Semitism that you're talking about. Like, was it an anti-Semitism shaped by reading, like, following Richard Spencer and listening to all of those like weird right-wing talking heads, or is it
right? That's the old school anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
The Holocaust was bullshit, and Jews are controlling the world.
But that is very much still a thing.
Have you experienced any anti-Semitism in your life?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, in the Bible
The
Belt.
anti-Semitism capital of the world. Pew, pew, pew!
But like, I was in the Bible Belt, and like, even the fact that I was at Catholic school, there were a lot of Protestant churches all around. But My Catholic school was apparently one of like the first schools in Tallahassee to integrate in the 60s. And so I guess it was already kind of a progressive place. And so when a Jew showed up, they were like, we can make it work. But I did still experience anti-Semitism. I think institutionally from the school, they worked really hard to not make our lesson plans too much about how I'm gonna go to hell after I die or something. But, you know, Holocaust jokes were a dime a dozen. I think I learned early on to just be like, whatever, man. Like, I don't care. But I definitely, it's frustrating and it's annoying, but it always came from the old anti-Semitism, if that makes sense.
What does being Jewish mean to you?
To me personally, being Jewish is about inheriting a history that's like a big tapestry, and a history that I interpret to mean that we need to be for social justice. We need to be anti-racist. We need to be, I guess for lack of a better word, progressive. I don't like the specific political implications of that, but to me, the essence of Judaism is somewhere between tzedek, tirdof, and tikkun olam. I guess like a kind of no justice, no peace ethos. But I'm far be it for me to prescribe what Judaism is to anyone. But for me, it's
Well, what now? What is it about to you?
to me, it's about reflecting on our history of diasporism and oppression and endeavoring to model a better way of living, a more ethical way of living.
What are your thoughts on BDS?
I think BDS is a super valid, like, tactical way to financially pressure Israel. I will say If Not Now has no official position on it.
It seems like If Not Now doesn't have a lot of official positions except for, defunding APAC, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean ending, at the very least, conditioning U.S. aid. But it's also about...
I mean, if those things were to happen, where would If Not Now go? Would If Not Now just cease to exist?
No, I mean, it would depend on what would happen after those things ended. I think we always, part of our mission statement is that we're doing this for a thriving future and equality and justice for all people. And I think if we were to start conditioning aid to Israel, I think If Not Now would figure out how we can still be pursuing that same goal, justice, equality, and a thriving future for all people, given whatever circumstances. Does that make sense? I don't think we would disappear. I think people join If Not Now not just because of the specific goal of ending U.S. support for Israeli apartheid, but also coming together to envision modes of Jewish community that aren't by default Ashkenazi-centric. We want to be welcoming to any and all Jews.
How about non-Jews? Are there Palestinians that are involved, or is this only a movement for Jews by Jews?
It's a movement of Jews, but we do, speaking for the Chicago chapter, we're figuring out some cool partnerships with local Palestinian activists. I think we recognize that, well, first of all, Palestinian and Jewish, not mutually exclusive. But I don't know if we would be like, no, you can't join if you're not a Jew.
I mean, I hope not,
No,
right?
I
That seems
would
like the
not do
opposite of
that.
everything that you guys are standing for. But it seems
But
like
it is, but
it's
like,
focused towards Jews, especially progressive Jews.
yeah, we're organizing our community, the Jewish community.
It's trying to stop U.S. support for Israel. But, I mean, like, how is it trying to have a positive impact on Palestinians and their lives now?
We have a lot of cool relationships with orgs on the ground that are doing really important work, like Breaking the Silence, which doesn't directly impact Palestinians besides like vocalizing the brutality of the occupation. But what are they called? The Refusal Solidarity Network. We have a lot of just cool. Sorry, repeat the question. I'm so bad at this.
It's okay. I just was trying to find out like what kind of involvement like we have from Palestinians with the If Not Now organization. How could we get more Palestinians involved? How could we bring Jewish people who want to affect change in Israel together with Palestinians?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, speaking for the Chicago chapter, trying to just really find opportunities for connection. We actually had a phone bank event this past Sunday where like 10 of us maybe got together and just like reached out in our networks to get people to sign on to the Reject AIPAC campaign. And at the end of the event, we had a representative from the Palestine Activists Organization Network, the PAON. He and a couple other activists showed up and we all kind of got to meet each other for the first time. And so we're very much in the nascent stages with Chicago, and that's my chapter that I organize with. So even though I do socials, I'm still not involved in like the chapter organizing for Boston and Philly and stuff.
Okay.
But I think recognizing that we are speaking within our community on the one hand, but also trying to recognizing that, as you mentioned before, like apartheid is heinous. That's kind of the root of this. I will say that like co-solidarity, co-resistance with Palestinian activists and orgs is like a high priority.
So, we're wrapping up now. So I want to ask you, to continue kind of with, what we were just talking about, like, what kind of message would you like to give to Palestinians that are, listening or watching this or don't know about If Not Now, or, as a member of that movement, what would you, if you could say one thing to them, what would you like to say?
That's hard. You're not alone. There are many, many American Jews that know what's happening on the ground and find it unacceptable, and we are making noise and we will not stop.
And what would you like to say to your fellow Jews?
First of all, I don't hate any of you, including me. And I think I'm guilty of this too, like in arguing about the politics of it all. Sometimes I forget that like a lot of us on opposing sides do still have that shared goal of like a better future. And whether you think I'm approaching it the right way or not, I know that I am. And if you ever want to chat, I think conversations are really important, and I'd be happy to chat with you, especially if you think I'm a self-hating Jew.
So where can people find you? Where can people learn more about If Not Now?
at ifnotnow.org on socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter. We're on TikTok also relatively recently, so go check out our TikTok. And if you want to chat with me in good faith, you can DM the If Not Now Instagram. I also, this didn't really come up, but I do comms and social media work for the upcoming documentary Israelism. So,
great film. I saw it. I really
you saw
enjoyed
it? Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole other interview about my thoughts on that film. I really appreciate the grace and empathy that film, the storytelling models in kind of addressing the black and white of apartheid is unacceptable. Jewish supremacist apartheid is unacceptable. But recognizing that the things that motivate a lot of American Jews to be pro-Israel are concerns about Jewish safety and traumatic memory from the Holocaust. And even if we disagree, we still have to validate those fears, because that is real. Anti-Semitism is real and is rising, and we're only going to be able to have a chance against it if we all fight together. And that doesn't just mean all Jews, that means all people, all marginalized people.
Absolutely, Sami. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on the podcast and for all the work you do with If Not Now. Be sure to check out If Not Now, their website, learn more about it. They do events. You can check them out on Instagram. If you want to slide into Sami's DMs, you could do so on the If Not Now on their official page, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a bunch for each chapter, so just go to there. Of course, you can find me across all social media at Jonathan Randall. Thanks for tuning in to this special episode of American Jew, the interview. See you soon.